Sometimes people ask me questions about the lore of Warhammer 40K that really get my gears turning. A question that is just begging to be answered, has been teased in the official 40K lore, has to be researched into the ground to properly understand, and explained in a way where you can win any argument with your friends while you are beating them on the tabletop. Today's video is about one of those absolutely great questions that just keeps popping up. How many Custodes does it take to kill a Primarch? We all know what a Custodian is, one of the 10,000 golden protectors of the God Emperor of mankind himself, the supposedly finest creations ever wrought by his hands. And we also all probably know about the Primarchs, his 20, 21, or 19 or 9 sons that conquered the entire galaxy in under 2 centuries, are the gene fathers of the Space Marines, and also turned the Imperium into the mess we know today. But both are constantly regarded with this almost godlike power, as if nothing in the universe could beat them besides one of their own kind. So in today's Warhammer 40K lore video, we are going to take a look at how many Custodians it would theoretically take to kill a single Primarch. We are going to take a look into their actual combat prowess, cover multiple excerpts on how their minds work and how similar both Primarchs and Custodes actually are, and end off with a theoretical list of every single Primarch on how many Custodes are needed to take them down. And let me tell you, there are a surprising number of sources, examples, and in-universe opinions on this exact subject. Games Workshop writers absolutely love teasing us with the idea of these two kinds of god warriors fighting. So let's finally answer the question they keep asking. Alright, let's get into the lore. The Emperor of mankind, beloved by all, was a being of such power that not even the immortal Perpetuals could keep up with his plans and dreams for humanity. Yet the Emperor did not intend to reunite humanity and face down the forces of chaos all by himself. And if no one was worthy enough to lead the Emperor's armies, and no one could truly stand beside him, he would create them with his own hands. The first of these were the Custodes, warriors created to be the perfect companions and confidants of the Emperor. These warriors alone were permitted to know the Emperor's true plan, a cast of soldiers to stay by his side and stop at nothing to protect him. Yet, the Custodes were so much more than just bodyguards. To ensure their master could never be threatened by any means, the Custodes became masters of politics, assassination, and even studied history and philosophy. To be a companion to the greatest mind humanity has ever produced was a task only suited to those whose very essence was to fulfill this singular purpose. Before the Emperor even conceived of the idea of the Primarchs, it was them he asked for their opinions. Many argued that the Imperium must be built by the flesh and blood of mortal humans. If humanity needed guidance, then let the Emperor and his most trusted of agents lead their armies. Although most Custodes argued for hours against the creation of the Primarchs and the stealing of the fire of the Dark Gods, they still accepted the Emperor's decision without hesitation, even if they thought he was wrong. Where the Custodians were diplomats, bodyguards, and confidants, the Emperor created the Primarchs to be his warlords, warriors without equal, and natural leaders with indomitable will to dominate over all others. Lionel Johnson was a destroyer, a weapon reserved for the most deserving of enemies. Others, like Sanguinius or Rabute Gilliman, would elevate humanity to awe-inspiring levels of courage and honor on the battlefields, while some of the Primarchs, like Angron or Conrad Kurz, were weapons with which to punish, rip and tear all those who dare to stand in the way of progress. All the Primarchs were so much more than just warlords with which to conquer the galaxy. Perturabo was a man of science, a brilliant architect turned bloody tool. Magnus's quest for knowledge was one that never ended. Others like Fulgrim and Vulcan were compassionate leaders. They commanded their sons to glory, but to also ensure they would raise the common man with them. As Fulgrim once said, "Look at them, my sons. You are the highest, and they the lowest. It is your duty to raise them as high as they will go. Anything less is not worthy of you." Even the brutal Catonian gang lord Horus was not blind to compassion before his fall. Yet, if the Custodes and Primarchs understood the Emperor's vision, created to unite humanity, why is there so much animosity between them? Like, they just keep fighting in the lore. For every quality shared between the Custodes and the Primarchs, there are a dozen differences that fundamentally oppose each other. Perhaps the first and foremost of these was the level of trust given to them by the Emperor. When the Thunder Warriors needed to be destroyed, the Emperor handed this duty to his custodians instead of the first ever Space Marines. While the Emperor shared his vision for humanity with each of his sons, he only ever shared the journey with his Custodes. For every secret the Emperor shared with his Primarchs, he shared even more with his Golden Companions. After all, the Custodes destroyed the Thunder Warriors and were trained from the very beginning to be able to kill the Space Marines. And indeed, this might even have to extend to the Primarchs one day. And in the novels, like in Era of Ruin, right after the Horus Heresy has ended, one of the greatest Custodes to have ever lived, Tribune Diocletian, considers whether he could take on Roboute Guilliman or not. Diocletian stops moving, he stops breathing, he is an animal in that very moment, a thing of urges and desires, frozen in place as he feels his heartbeat quicken. If he isn't careful, if he doesn't master his instinct and his rage, then the Imperium will lose another Primarch this day. He isn't convinced that wouldn't be for the best. Perhaps it would be, but he doesn't believe it's his decision to make. The others sense it too. It passes between every talon in the chamber, as wordless and true as a sister's hand signals. He sees Hado shift position, ever so slightly adjusting his balance. He sees Caria tilt her head a fraction of an inch, and by her thigh, she taps her first finger against the tip of her thumb in silent signal. They will join him in battle. He sees others, custodians and sisters, in absolute harmony and absolute unity. If he acts now, they will act with him before the courageous and honorable Fools in Blue can even aim their bolters, and then they can kill Guilliman. But could the Custodes really beat the Primarchs? Are the 10,000 all bark and no bite? Or could they actually defeat the very sons of the Emperor? To truly understand how a fight between the Custodes and Primarchs would go, we first need to get a better sense of how they fight, act, think, and just how strong they really are. For the Custodes, I have already covered them in painful detail in my How Powerful Are Custodes video, so I will keep their explanation short in this one, but we will still hit all the beats that matter to this video. Custodes are formidable warriors, oftentimes a literal golden blur of movement and death. Each custodian fights his own battle, doing so not only because they are capable of such feats, but because it is required of them. Their formations are fluid, but also a bulwark against a raging ocean. At the height of their power, during the Great Crusade, Custodes were followed by artificers and arsenal trolls who reloaded the weapons of their masters while they continued fighting. To stand among these warriors was to share mutual respect for experience and gifts beyond comprehension. To this day, few, if any, orders ever need to be barked by their leaders. The Custodes simply focus on their slaughter and nothing else. This individualism, however, does come with a unity of purpose. Two separate Custodes never get in each other's way. Sometimes their weapons pass mere inches away from their fellow custodians to hit an enemy from an angle they thought impossible. There is a story of a tech priest who once witnessed the 10,000 fight during the Horus Heresy, who noted how there was an inherent defensiveness in the initial moments when the Custodes fought their enemies. In these precious first few seconds, each custodian measures and judges their foes and almost always finds them to be wanting. In truth, Custodes can overpower any enemy, crushing them with superior strength or speed, and then move on to the next. But where's the value in that? Instead, they take this split second to learn from each fight, understanding their enemies' patterns, and from that, create an artistic strike that perfectly bypasses their defenses, kind of like learning the attack pattern of a boss in Elden Ring. However, are there any inherent weaknesses in how the Custodes fight? What could a Primarch exploit and use against them? Well, as seen in The First Heretic, the Wordbearers quickly uncovered their greatest flaw. There's something about the way they fight, some flaw that I can't make out. Argoltal watched Aquilin, the custodian's blade reaving its way through countless lives, and saw nothing of the kind. He said so. Torgal shook his head, still watching. I can't form the thought. They lack something. They're fighting wrong. And at this time, as soon as Argoltal returned his gaze to the battle in the street, he saw it instantly. The way the Custodes fought almost seemed identical to the Astartes. It took a trained eye to see the subtle differences. The captain had missed it at first by focusing on a single warrior. The moment he took in the full view, there, I see it too. Was it a flaw? Perhaps by the standards of the Astartes, who waged war and lived life with brotherhood etched into their genetic codes. But Custodes were the sons of the most rarefied and time-consuming process, the biological manipulation that gave birth to the Emperor's guardians, bred warriors who weren't shackled by bonds of loyalty to anyone except their imperial overlord. They're not brothers. Watch how they move. See how each one fights his own war. Alone, unsupported by the others. They're not like us. These are warriors, not soldiers. The thought made his skin crawl. It must have had the same effect on Torgal, for he voiced the words on his captain's mind. Lions. They're lions, not wolves. Hunting alone instead of as a pack. A golden pack, he added and tapped the chestplate of his armor. Not grey. Good eyes, brother. Argoltal still stared intently. Now that he was aware of the disunity, it was all he could focus on. Here was a weakness, a savage one, masked only by the heroic skills of each warrior and the wordlessness of the enemies they faced. A ripple of unease shivered through him as he bore witness. Those ancient words of the Emperor came to him, the first creed of the Legiones Astartes, and they shall know no fear. Argoltal was one of those who took the creed in its most literal sense, believing the sensitivity to feel fear was rewritten out of him at the genetic level. But even so, watching these brotherless cousins fight chilled him to the core. They lacked so much, despite their individual perfection. In standing free of brotherhood, they also sacrifice its strengths, the tactics of a pack, the trust in those who fight by your side. I suspect the secrets woven into their body and blood gene bind them to a higher loyalty. Perhaps their only brother is the Emperor himself. For all the individual might of the Custodes, the Wordbearers are right. Although terrifying individual combatants, they really struggle fighting together. They lack the unity and teamwork that the sons of the Primarchs naturally exhibit. If you'll excuse me, I need to go on a little side tangent here. Due to how Custodes are portrayed as the guardians of the Emperor, many people assume that they kind of work like the IG-100 Magna Guards from Star Wars, where, for example, 4 of them surround a helpless Jedi, attacking from all sides at once, and as the noble warrior is disarmed by the main Magna Guard, all 3 others immediately zap him with their electrostaff, incapacitating or outright killing them. For how cool this looks in episode 3, Custodes sadly do not fight like that. As Argoltal says, they are lions. They will fight their enemy one by one, learning their patterns, showing it to their brothers, and one by one, they get better at fighting their target. But back to the power level of individual Custodes, it is pretty well understood that in a one-on-one fight, Custodes make short work of Space Marines. In fact, we have many examples of this. From Ra and Dimian fighting World Eaters in the Webway, to Valerian facing the Black Legion in the skies of Terra. During these fights, we often see Custodes take on multiple Astartes at once. In some cases, it's almost easy. Custodes are very powerful, but they have their flaws. Now let's take a look at how strong Primarchs are. Of course, there are 20 or 21 of them, and each of them is essentially completely different in their fighting style and general skill level. But there are still a lot of common traits between them. Reading over 60 Horus Heresy books has shown me that Games Workshop writers all love making the Primarchs absolutely ridiculous. Custodes fight with their own unique methods, but in contrast to this, each Primarch has their own unique and very distinctive fighting style. While Custodes should never underestimate Space Marines, Primarchs face very little challenge when fighting one. Few moments in the Siege of Terra are as iconic as when Sigismund charged Fulgrim, the greatest duelist Astartes to have ever lived, wounded the demon Primarch, but then was instantly swatted aside like a child. Also earlier in the Heresy, Angron even baited Argoltal into a fight, but when the leader of the Galverbach jumped at Angron, he was caught mid-air and just thrown away like he was nothing. Even Karn during the Siege of Terra would have his own moment of being swatted away by Rogel Dorn, who didn't even give him a second thought. The number of times Primarchs have killed Space Marines or made them look like children is almost too numerous to cover in this video. But are there any moments where a Space Marine, or maybe even a half Astartes, actually properly hurts a Primarch? Well, there is a surprising duel between Corfarin and Guilliman as seen in Know No Fear, where a man who has been turned into a half Astartes nearly kills the Primarch of the 13th. Corfarin, master of the dark fate, master of the unspeakable word, orders his men forward. Then he flies at Guilliman, trailing dark vapor, coruscating with black energies torn from the pits of the warp. Bastard! Guilliman howls. He does not flinch, not for a second. Corfarin greets Guilliman with a beam of smoke light, a column of wretched darkness that bursts from the palm of his right hand and smashes the 13th Primarch into the chamber wall. Guilliman gets back up, but he is shaken. The wall is crumpled where he struck it. Corfarin cries out, a bark of straining effort, and manufactures another ray of smoke light. Guilliman is charging, but the beam slams him back into the bulkhead with a kinetic slap so powerful that it rings out with a deafening sonic boom. Guilliman staggers up, falls, and then half rises, clenching his power fist. The ceramite of his breastplate is cracked. Guilliman coughs, and blood drips from his mouth. He tries to stand. Corfarin blasts him again, this time with a weird, negative electricity that crackles around Guilliman and causes him to seize in violent spasms. Guilliman is left on his hands and knees, his cobalt blue plating scorched, his head bowed, his whole form smoldering as the superheated armor burns his skin. The word-bearer draws his atame and steps forward. Corfarin stoops beside the crumpled Primarch. Guilliman is breathing fast and ragged, his armor smokes, discolored, and his blood pools beneath him. Ultimately, what saved Guilliman was not his power as a Primarch, but instead Corfarin's supreme arrogance in trying to corrupt him. While Guilliman bled from the atame, cutting his throat, he managed to cripple Corfarin with a single punch when he was gloating. Although it is pretty obvious that Corfarin was able to demolish Guilliman using sorcerer's powers besides his semi-Astartes frame, there is also the time the Alpha Legion tried to assassinate the Primarch of the Ultramarines. During this fight, a group of assassins came to an unarmed Guilliman, pretending to be Ultramarines, and ambushed him with bolters. During this assassination attempt, Guilliman began to dodge incoming bolter rounds, flinging furniture at his attackers to allow him to counterattack. His attackers managed to wound him. One of the assassins was grabbed by Guilliman and used as a shield. When this unfortunate Alpha Legionary died to friendly fire, Guilliman reached for his Gladius. With his new weapon, Guilliman killed 2 assassins, but in return, their bolters finally started hammering him. When he reached for a bolter to fire back, there was enough concentrated fire to force him back. Guilliman hurled a stone bust of Connor, killing his 4th assassin. Then he threw the Gladius, killing a 5th. The palace guards were at the door, but the Alpha Legionaries had overridden the access codes, making it difficult for the Victrix Guard to save their Primarch. Guilliman killed a 6th assassin and finally retrieved a bolter. After shooting his 7th assassin, another managed to punch his Gladius into Guilliman's side. With a single punch, this assassin was sent flying as well, but his Gladius was still stuck in Guilliman. More bolter shot hit the Primarch, blinding him from the concussive force. Another assassin came at Guilliman's throat with his sword, and Guilliman killed him with a bolter after taking a wound, with the only remaining assassin being a wounded warrior crawling on the floor for a weapon. Guilliman finished the fight. He then dropped to his knees, and he almost died. Besides all this combat prowess, Primarchs also exude an aura of raw fear, which, yes, makes even Space Marines feel true fear. When the traitor legions committed their first act of betrayal on Istvan III, Saul Tarvitz of the Emperor's Children fled when he saw Angron charge his sons. He fled because the loyalist World Eaters told him that this was not his fight. He fled so he could regroup with his brothers. But more importantly, he fled because Angron made him feel fear. Even Icona Sharokin, a Raven Guard who had almost succeeded in killing Fulgrim, was grateful when coming face to face with Alfarius, who luckily had no interest in fighting him. Now that we have covered the general abilities of both Primarchs and Custodes, how do these two creations of the Emperor usually interact? Why would they fight in the first place? Have they ever talked about it? Maybe even given some in-lore opinions on who would win? Well, the answer is both complicated, but also straightforward. Before the Emperor created the Primarchs, he gathered his most trusted custodians and asked them for their opinions, with most, if not all, of them speaking against the creation of the Primarchs. Yet the Custodes are also the most loyal servants the galaxy has ever seen, and so would still fight alongside the Primarchs during the Great Crusade. The Custodes often preferred to keep their distance from the Primarchs. Valdor was not the biggest fan of Alfarius, something we will cover in a moment, but during the Siege of Terra, he formed an incredibly strong bond with both Sanguinius and Rogel Dorn. Yet other Custodes, such as Aquilon, who was sent to watch over Lorgar after the burning of Monarchia, considered him a weakling Primarch. He and the Custodes who joined him almost had open contempt for the Primarch of the Wordbearers. And yes, they truly believed they could kill him if they had to. Before all of the Chaos corruption happened, of course. The Horus Heresy would, however, changed the dynamic between the Primarchs and Custodes even more. What used to be a distant respect for the sons of the Emperor grew into bitter mistrust and hatred for them and the Space Marines. Even when the Emperor was freshly interred upon the Golden Throne, the Custodes almost came into direct conflict with Rabute Guilliman. The Primarch had arrived late to the Siege of Terra, having found a broken Imperium and swiftly wrestled power away from all others so he might save his father's creation. An act that left a bitter taste in the warriors who had actually fought during the Siege of Terra. Earlier in this video, I already covered a part of this excerpt to set the tone for this script, but let's now take a look at the full excerpt from the Carrion Lord of the Imperium short story from the Era of Ruin anthology, as this perfectly encapsulates what the Custodes truly see in the Primarchs, and how they all believe they could kill the sons of the Emperor, even with small forces of their golden 10,000. It is the final days of the Primarchs and their legions. Soon they will be exiled from Terra as the new leaders of the Imperium close the tome of history on the age of gods and demigods. A new age of stagnation and fear is dawning, built over the bones of truths best left forgotten. Diocletian is going to kill Roboute Guilliman. He knows it with the surety that he's ever known anything, that unless the self-proclaimed Lord Commander of the Imperium doesn't fall silent at once, Dio and the custodians at his side and the remaining furtive, persecuted sisters in this grand chamber will draw their blades, and they will kill the creature that believes itself the heir of the Empire. Time and time again, they have endured Guilliman's speeches, his declarations of intent, his orders that counter even the wishes of his own brothers, to the point where they are already whispering of another war. A war, this time, over Guilliman's vision of the Imperium. Are you listening, Diocletian? I call for unity, at a time when we need it most. Diocletian is listening. He doesn't hear calls of unity, he hears demands of obedience. The time they most needed unity was decades ago, when half of Guilliman's breed set the galaxy aflame. Are you finished? Diocletian asked softly. Are you done? This is how Diocletian looks to the world outside of his brothers and sisters. He is almost entirely without warmth and without honor. His genetic lessers irritate him, and he regards no being as his genetic superior. He is decisive, authoritative, and absent of all patience. I grow wary of your mistrust, says Roboute Guilliman, savior of Terra, lord of the armies of humanity, avenging son of the Emperor, and then he says Diocletian's title, which was once Ra's title, in a tone of voice that, to human ears, is perfectly smooth, perfectly calm. Tribune. My mistrust, Diocletian repeats. His tone is that of a man seeking clarity. He wants to be sure he heard what he thinks he heard. My mistrust. There was so much Diocletian wanted to say, but naming the sins of the Primarchs would take so long, the very light of soul would burn out before he was finished. You say the Emperor would trust you now with the resurrection of the Imperium. If he trusted you, why did he need 10,000 bodyguards? And why weren't you one of them? Why weren't you called upon the defense of the webway? Why did he entrust that most vital task to his true chosen? Why, whenever he related the truth of the galaxy, was it never his sons that he told? Diocletian could say all of this, and it would be so satisfying. Instead, Diocletian leads the talons away from Guilliman. Carrie, a sister of silence, would even tell Diocletian she smelled the stink of defeat on Guilliman. She believed he would die soon. Diocletian would speak prophetic words, telling her the Primarchs were not built to last forever. And indeed, years later, Roboute Guilliman would almost die at the hands of Fulgrim and be placed in stasis for nearly 10 full millennia. From how Diocletian reacts and thinks, it is more than obvious that he had enough Custodes and sisters with him to kill Roboute Guilliman and the Ultramarines who guarded him. How many were there with him? We do not know. There could have been a dozen, maybe 100 in total, but the talons of the Emperor are still some of the most lethal tools the Emperor has at his disposal. But while Diocletian chooses to walk away from a fight with Guilliman, there have been several times the Custodes and Primarchs actually fought. Let's take a look at every canon example of when Custodes and Primarchs have fought. Alpharius versus Valdor. Supposedly, Alpharius attempted to recreate what an assassination on the Emperor would look like before the Great Crusade even began. During this, Alpharius stole the armor and weapons from a Custodes and took aim at the Emperor, but before he could take his shot, he noticed Constantine Valdor was missing and suddenly found himself dueling the Captain General of the Custodes on a nearby rooftop. We get to see this fight from Alpharius' perspective, as seen in Head of the Hydra. I realized Valdor was not present with the welcoming party a moment before instinct made me throw myself forwards, and the sizzling power blade of the Apollonian spear sliced through the overhang under which I'd been sheltered. I came back up to my feet, balancing on the spine of the roof, and Constantine Valdor came at me like a golden thunderstorm. Despite his size, despite the bulk of his armor, he moved as smoothly as a dancer along the narrow ridge. He was the Emperor's greatest champion, Terra's mightiest warrior, and peerless in combat. So far. The Guardian Spear I held was not manufactured to the same standards as my adversary's weapon, but neither was it a feeble twig. I met him blade to blade, countering and parrying each of his thrusts, then responding in kind. He matched me, his guard as good as my own, then knocked my blade aside and thrust for my heart. It was a killing blow. I somersaulted over it, clearing Valdor and lashing out with my spear at his back as I did so. I expected his suit to superbly crafted aramite to turn the blow, at least enough to avoid him taking any serious harm. I did not expect him to be able to withdraw the Apollonian spear from his thrust in time to parry my slash, and then turn to face me as I landed on my feet, facing him in turn. I smiled then, for this truly was a test. While this fight ends with Malcador ordering them to stop, it is rather impressive to see Valdor, the greatest of the Custodes, be an actual match for Alpharius, who is perhaps the least of the Primarchs in matters of combat, but at the same time, still a Primarch. Don't forget though, Dorn did slay Alpharius at the Battle of Pluto, without really breaking a sweat. But there is no death in this one. What does it look like when a Primarch truly tries to kill the Golden Guardians? Angron vs Custodes. When Angron was found by the Emperor, the master of mankind found only the ghost of a Primarch, a broken gladiator unwilling to serve. The Emperor's psychic powers caused Angron's nails to flare up, biting down hard, and because he was preparing himself for a battle, he lashed out at the first figure who approached him. A lone custodian was grabbed, torn in half from collar to groin in a single movement. A dozen or more custodians leveled their guardian spears at him and slowly approached. Angron saw dozens of flaws and weaknesses he wanted to exploit, but before he could kill even more, the Emperor stopped him. Okay, so Primarchs can tear through Custodes with their bare hands, ripping them in half with very little resistance. Also, apparently, Primarchs can immediately recognize flaws in their enemies, giving them an edge over what the Custodes do, which is to learn through fighting and trial. Primarchs can essentially see this before the fight even happens. And lastly, Dorn vs Custodes. Although it seems odd to think that Rogel Dorn would fight the Custodes, during the Horus Heresy, he had a single standoff with them. Two of the custodians, Amon and Hado, were investigating a powerful man on Terra named Pharaon Sishar, and when they discovered him to be a traitor, they came to arrest him. Yet as they did, Rogel Dorn arrived with rather grim news, as seen in Blood Games. Pharaon Sishar is a traitor and spy. He is using the networks of his extensive mercantile empire to communicate with the War Master and his benighted rebels. We have just cause and evidence enough to hold him and interrogate him. He will come with us. Or, asked Dorn with a soft, almost amused smile. He will come with us, my lord, Amon insisted. Dorn nodded. An object lesson in determination and loyalty, eh, Archimus? Indeed, my lord, replied the commander of the Huskarls. They would fight 6 Astartes and a Primarch in order to accomplish their duty. My lord, please stand aside. I am half tempted to let you attempt to go through me. I would, of course, hurt you both. You would try, my lord, Hado added. Enough. Archimus, the retinue commander, stepped forward. Lord Sishar of High Brasil is a spy. Lord Sishar of High Brasil has been in regular communication with Horus Lupercal and has exchanged with the traitor a great deal of intelligence. But Lord Sishar was also a double agent employed by Rogel Dorn. But the investigation of the Custodes caused him to be compromised. Rogel Dorn had grown frustrated with the Custodes to a certain degree during the heresy. He did not enjoy their secrets, the preferential treatment from the Emperor, and the complete lack of communication, which caused Dorn to lose a very useful double agent. Although the standoff between Dorn and the two Custodes can also be seen as both sides kind of testing each other, rather than actually threatening, it is a good reminder that no matter what, the Custodes only ever served the Emperor. So let's finally answer the question, how many Custodes does it take to kill a Primarch? Well, there are a few things we can mention to help us paint a better picture. The first of these is the Oculi Imperator, the Custodes sent to watch Lorgar and the Wordbearers. The Oculi Imperator acted as the eyes of the Emperor first and foremost, but there were 5 Custodes dispatched to the Wordbearers' primary expeditionary fleets for this task. As we know, these warriors could not defeat or even hope to keep the entire Wordbearers Legion in check, but it does leave us wondering if 5 Custodes were enough to kill Lorgar. While it is not a concrete answer, I think putting the minimum number of Custodes needed to kill any Primarch as low as 5 is a little too hopeful for our golden boys, but perhaps feasible against the less martially inclined Primarchs. 5 might very well be enough to take down Lorgar if they catch him off guard, but as we see in our next source, I would put him closer at like 8 to 10 for a proper, well-armed and semi-prepared fight. Another estimation we have actually comes from Guilliman himself in the novel Godblight. In this novel, Guilliman is joined by Tribune Colquhoun, 3 Alaris Terminators, 5 Wardens, and 10 regular Custodes. Guilliman muses how this number of almost 20 Custodes could conceivably beat him. Okay, so those are the 2 canonical sources we have of how many Custodes it would take to fight an actual Primarch. Anywhere from 5 Custodes on an unprepared Primarch to 20 Custodes on a well-prepared Primarch, but in the lower scale of martial prowess. And then, from my estimations and from what we have seen so far in the lore, 25 to 30 Custodes to take on any of the stronger Primarchs. I do want to quickly add though, the 50 Custodes sent to help the Emperor fight God Horus were kind of immediately overwhelmed. But I don't think counting God Horus as a normal Primarch is really fair for the purpose of this video. So enough about him. I am making a full video about God Horus and his fight with the Emperor very soon. You know what? Here is my scientifically proven how many Custodes does it take to kill a Primarch list, ranked by the amount of actual Custodes needed to, well, kill them. This skill is definitely not biased and not based on any preferences or pre-perceived ideas whatsoever. Also, yes, this list is based on pre-heresy combat fighting, and also assumes that there are Sisters of Silence nearby if the Primarch happens to be a Psyker. Preparation and all that. Going from the least amount of Custodians needed to the most amount of Custodians needed. 0 to 5 Custodes, Alpharius and Omegon. 5 to 10 Custodes, Lorgar and Mortarion. 10 to 15 Custodes, Vulcan. 15 to 20 Custodes, Rabute Guilliman, Magnus, Rogel Dorn, Perturabo and Ferrus Manus. 20 to 25 Custodes, Corvus Corax, Leman Russ, Angron and Conrad Kurz. 25 to 40 Custodes, Lion L. Johnson, Horus Lupercal, Sanguinius, Jagatai Khan and Fulgrim. If Constantine Valdor is part of the group attacking said Primarch, he would count for about 4 Custodes. Of course, it is not very exact, and mostly my unfiltered opinion, but I hope it gives you a general idea of the differences between Primarchs and Custodes. And while yes, 5 Custodes could kill a Primarch, they most likely need a lot more to really make it happen with any form of certainty. But to end this video off, I wanna look at one last excerpt from Godblight, where even the Adeptus Custodes are confused about having to be the bodyguards of Roboute Guilliman. Like, if it takes 20 of them to take him down, why does he need bodyguards in the first place? "We're supposed to be guarding him," said Versilian. He had recently completed his 5th century of service and had taken the honor robes of the Wardens. "He needs no guarding, Tribune. We are, I fear, entirely ancillary to purposes here." Guilliman cuts through the machines of the Death Guard as if they were paper stage props. "We must watch him," growled the Tribune. "He is not invulnerable, and you must watch your tone also, Versilian. Primarch he may be, but in him dwells the hopes of all of us, for the moment. I will not have him die under my protection, because we allowed ourselves to stumble into this ambush." Privately, he conceded that Versilian had a point. There was nothing to greet them in that chamber that could even slow the Primarch down. For all his suspicions of Guilliman's intentions, Colguan could not fault him as a warrior. The Adeptus Custodes records maintained that the Primarchs had been created primarily as weapons. Having seen Guilliman fight many times now, he judged the fact proven. Guilliman exhibited many other qualities in governance, administration, and law, but he was, ultimately, an unsheathed blade. All his other skills were adornments on the hilt. So, in conclusion, the relationship between the Custodes and the Primarchs remains to be one of the most interesting rivalries in the entire Imperium. On one hand, we have the Sons of the Emperor, 20 or 21, Primarchs created to be natural leaders and guides of humanity. On the other, we have the personal companions of the Emperor, warriors whose loyalty is absolute. With the Lion having returned to the galaxy, it will only be a matter of time before he has to have his own encounters with the Custodes. While Guilliman has both positive and negative interactions with them, we have rarely, if ever, seen what the older Lion thinks about the Custodes. Could he perhaps feel threatened by them in his older age, or would he still absolutely fault them? And would it still take 20 plus of them to take him down? But what do you think of all of this? How many Custodes do you think it takes to kill any of the Primarchs? Please put your estimations and ideas down in the comment section below. I would absolutely love to see what you guys think about how this would work, and how many it would take. And out of all Primarchs, which one needs the most Custodes to be taken down? Would it be Fulgrim due to his unmatchable speed? Or maybe even Angron or Lionel Johnson? Let me know your comments, concerns, suggestions, theories and ideas down in the comment section below. If you think I deserved it with this video, please leave a like and hit that subscribe button. It helps push this video into the algorithm and it would make me very happy. Thank you for watching, and I'll be seeing you guys in the next one. Bye bye.